Hello everyone and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon video. In honor of the absolutely amazing and wonderful nerfs to the ego gifts Thrill and Glimpse of Flames, I've taken upon myself to specifically not use them for this run because I hate them with a burning passion. Sure, it's a little upsetting that speedrunning the Mirror Dungeon is now a little bit harder with them being significantly worse, but in my opinion it barely makes a difference. They now cap out at 500 damage instead of 10,000, which is ridiculous that they could even do that in the first place, but 500 damage is more than enough to one-shot most basic enemies, and for bosses it still does a significant chunk to their health. Ultimately, the change makes it so that instead of taking one turn to beat a fight, it now takes 2 turns. Still ridiculously efficient and why I still will never touch them. Anyway, the main point of this video is honestly more focused around the nerf to the Hell's Chicken ego gifts. These effectively make it so that both Burn and Rupture effectively have infinite count, but now they can only give you 9 count per turn. That's still a decent amount, but just in case you don't think so, I've taken upon myself to create the actual worst Rupture team in existence, just to prove that 9 count per turn is more than enough. The only requirement is that the identities used need to have at least one skill that can inflict Rupture. Otherwise you could just run a Burn team and call it the worst Rupture team. Now, before you say anything, yes, this technically isn't the worst Rupture team because we're using Fanghunt Honglu instead of K-Corp. Fanghunt is actually a decent Rupture identity all things considered, whereas K-Corp just happens to have Rupture in his kit. However, I hate the fact that Fanghunt Honglu could have been a good Rupture identity if he wasn't dead on arrival by the stupid 15-3 Rupture conditional, and so I've decided to use him instead because having said conditional is enough for me to see him as the worst identity. Before we get too deep into the run though, there is one other identity I want to talk about, and that is the actual worst Rupture identity in the game, Talisman Sinclair. After his nerf, it was very obvious that he was going to be a terrible identity, however, until I did this run, I didn't realize exactly to what extent. I was under the impression that despite his nerfs, he would still play relatively similar to how he did before, but that could not be further from the truth. Before, the most optimal way to play him was to use his skill 2 into his skill 3 so he could apply Talisman onto the enemy. The only way for him to gain enough Talisman in order to do that, though, was to make sure that he was attacking an enemy without Rupture with his skill 2, otherwise he would go over the required 5 Talisman and be unable to apply it to the enemy. This worked because he gains a minimum of 3 Talisman with his skill 2, and for every coin if he's attacking an enemy with Rupture, he gains an extra Talisman. Because he would only gain a single Talisman on his first coin, that Talisman would then apply Rupture before the check on his second coin, allowing it to then give him 2 more Talisman, and the same happens with his third coin, resulting in a max of 5. Now though, because Talisman requires Rupture count in order to apply any Rupture at all, if he attacks an enemy without Rupture, he only gains 3 Talisman. The only way for him to gain 5 is if he attacks an enemy with at least 6 Rupture count, and then takes a single hit afterwards. He requires so much effort and so much support that even though he has the potential to have really good Rupture potency support, it's never worth running him. He is dead. He is beyond dead. He is actually the worst identity in the game, period, and it's not even close. Anyway, after beating the first floor of the Outcast, we take the Ebony Brooch for our reward before heading into C for the next floor. Here we buy the Ragged Umbrella and Death Seeker while also fusing the Standard Duty Battery before making it to the boss against the King Trash Crab. The Ragged Umbrella basically has the same effect that the newly nerfed Rupture Chicken will have in the future. If you upgrade it once, it will give the first 3 deployed identities an extra 2 Rupture count when they win a clash, for a total of plus 6. It's not quite the plus 9 of the Chicken, but it's as close as we're gonna get. Still though, it's more than enough for us to be able to build a Rupture stack on the King Crab, while everyone who's not affected by the Umbrella focuses on the other crabs instead.
죄송해요. 잠시 어지러워서 못 봤어요.
방금 어떻게 하신 거죠?
대단한 일이라도 하신
깜짝
거겠죠?
놀랐어요.
차포잡이라 예상한 것보다 움직임이 더 좋구나.
명령대로!
다음은 어디요?
그래, 그렇게 시원하게 처리하니 보는 맛이 나는군. 일 처리는 빠르게 하는 편이 덜 답답한
부러지는 꼴 좀 보라지.
개체에게 치명적인 손상을 입히는 데 성공했습니다.
앞으로의 전투도 이대로만 부탁드리겠습니다.
취해서 쓰러지는군.
방금 공격 다음에 다른 개체에게도 다시 해봐줄래? 영상을 남기면 다른 직원에게도 도움이 될지도 몰라. 부위 하나가 파괴되었어. 이대로 똑같이만 한다면 모든 부위를 파괴시킬 수 있겠지?
We take a duplicate for our reward before heading into emotional repression for the next floor. Here we buy rags for their potential, and fuse Thunder Branch as well as Enrapturing Trance before making it to the boss against the Talisman doll. Thunder Branch and the Rag and Umbrella are pretty much the only two ego gifts we need to guarantee a Rupture stack never dies. Enrapturing Trance is also a nice backup in case I mess up horribly and end up failing to do even the most basic of math, but ultimately all of them together makes it impossible for us to ever kill a Rupture stack.
미끄러지는 꼴 좀 보라지.
개체 부위가 파괴되었습니다. 대형 매뉴얼을 어느 정도 숙지하셨나 보군요.
그대로 멈춰라.
두렵진 않네요.
We take Red Order for our reward before heading into Yield My Flesh for the next floor. Here we buy Smoking Gunpowder before making it to the boss against Bamboo-Hatted Kim. This is the first boss we're fighting that only has a single part, which is very important because when you're attacking an enemy with multiple parts, if you're about to kill the Rupture stack, you can simply not target the part with the Rupture stack and keep it alive that way. You don't have that same luxury against single target enemies, but as mentioned earlier, Thunder Branch and the Rag and Umbrella are more than enough to carry even the most count negative of identities, unless they're -6 because even then that's a little too much.
미끄러지는 꼴 좀 보라지.
강당.
갑니다.
너도 걸레짝이 되어버렸군.
We take the Rusted Hilt for our reward before heading into LCB regular checkup for the final floor. Here we find the Enhancer Mark IV and buy Spike Combat Boots as well as Twigs before making it to the boss against Hoenheim. Hoenheim is simultaneously a little tricky and quite easy to beat. The reason he's easy is because Rupture is just really good at countering his main gimmick. If most of your damage comes from a status effect, then his reflected damage does almost nothing after all. However, after the second turn, he doesn't attack very often, meaning that the Ragged Umbrella has substantially less value in this fight. Those first two turns, though, have enough skills for us to clash with in order for us to build up a large enough Rupture stack to keep alive for the remainder of the fight, which doesn't last very long because, like I said, Rupture is really good into Hoenheim.
나만 믿고 다들 집중해줘.
갑니다. 차!
상담에서 알려준 대로 잘했어. 역시 상담 프로그램을 진행한 건 잘한 일이야.
저희가 우세한 상황입니다.
먼지나게
이미
패주지.
매뉴얼을 대여섯 번은 어긴 직원들도 보이는데 이 책임은 다음에 묻도록 하죠.
괴로우신가요?
완벽한 한방. 시원한 걸.
너도 걸레짝이 되어버렸군.
이 구역의 혈기는 더 남지 않은 것 같아요. 그럼 이제 다음 사냥터로 가볼까요?
And that's how I beat Mirror Dungeon 6 with one of the worst Rupture teams of all time. Fanghunt Honglu obviously did most of the work because he's the only real Rupture identity on the team. Whether we used him or K-Corp though doesn't really matter after the second floor because like I said, Dragon Umbrella and Thunder Branch are more than enough to support every Rupture identity on their own. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one, and now that hard mode's finally out, we can actually start doing real runs again. Goodbye.